So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel. I'm very excited to be your moderator today, especially because we have three amazing speakers on sectors that are not very frequently taken over by African women in law. My name is Aïssa Toussek. I'm a senior counsel at the World Bank based in Abidjan and also the legal coordinator for Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, Guinea, and Benin. I'm going to introduce today the three speakers and let them talk a little bit more later about their background and how they got to these exciting fields, aviation, fintech, and sports. First of all, I would like to thank Jarba Dawini from the Institute and PD for putting together the webinar and the entire team. So I'm going to start with Penda Dosso, who is the Chief Transactions Counsel for Air Côte d'Ivoire, and then Amanda Dakouré, who is the Legal and Regulatory Counsel for Paystack, and Rita Benis, Senior Director Legal for NBA Africa and the Basketball Africa League. So we have a panel about 35 minutes, and then we have a Q&A section. So I would invite all the participants to ask their question in the Q&A section. You can make your comments in the chat. After that, we'll have a small poll, a survey that I would love for you to answer. It will help the Institute, caliber future webinars and panels. And then if the participants are on social media, please tag the Institute, use the hashtag, and you can share the key takeaways from today's session. So I'm ready to start. So I'm going to ask the first question to Penda. First of all, thank you so much again for joining the webinar today as a speaker. So Penda, can you tell us a little bit more on how you have built a successful career in aviation law, which is a niche area of practice, and then what inspired you to choose this area of law practice?
Okay, thank you, Aïssatou. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting us to this panel. I'm very thrilled to participate with the other panelists, and thank you for being the moderator. And okay, to start in aviation, first of all, when I finished college, I didn't really know that I wanted to do law, to study law, but I already liked how law connected people in kind of finding solution from themselves. And I didn't even think about aviation as an area of practice of law. I just stumbled into it when I got back from Montreal here in Abidjan, although I was in University of Montreal, and McGill had a very good program in aviation, but it was right next to me, and I didn't know. But yeah, I kind of really like it when I started aviation, and I did business law in general. So aviation is heart of it. It's a subject and at the heart of it. So you can apply your business law talent, your general business law talent to aviation or to any other sectors. I think the other panelists will have the occasion to talk about it. And I've always been also fascinated by the joy of traveling and waking up in a different place after a few hours flights. And that's it. I think I really enjoy working into aviation, and there's a lot of challenges. And we'll have during the panel the occasion to talk about all the different sectors in aviation law.
Can you share a little bit more about what you're doing right now with Air Côte d'Ivoire in terms of transaction? What is basically the core of your work?
It's a lot of aircraft financing and acquisition. We also have like banking and corporate governance, compliance with the Civil Aviation Authority. So it's a lot of regulatory. It's a standardized sector. Aviation, we have to be compliant with all the regulation in the world, in ICAO, and the Civil Aviation Authority, and so the airline is part of it. So we have connection with the airports, with air traffic control, the civil aviation, and ICAO in general. So we have litigation, we have corporate governance, and then the transaction side.
Correct. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to Rita. So Rita, you had a very interesting legal practice career, which includes years of experience on energy, infrastructure, a project. And so we would like to know what inspired you to move to sports law, and and are there connection with your previous areas of practice? Thank you.
Thanks, Aissatou, and thank you for inviting me to join this panel. Yes, indeed, when you come from 10 years as a lawyer in Paris doing energy and infrastructure and project finance, sports law is not a natural transition. So, but sports kind of chose me. Honestly, I was looking for a change. I wanted to get out of private practice, but what it was important to me in my next career move is having a stronger tie to the continent. And when I came across this opportunity, honestly, my first talk with the headhunter was, well, what do you want with me? I know nothing about IP and sports, much less basketball. And it's true, I don't know anything about basketball. More now than when I started at the NBA, luckily. But it turns out the NBA had a very, very ambitious plan for Africa and for its business internationally. But Africa in particular was going to be its main focus for the upcoming years. And what interested them in me is my practice of doing business in Africa according to international standards, which the NBA has a very high standard of doing business. And the BL has a slogan. It's inspire, empower, elevate, and it applies on the court to basketball, but also to business standards. So it wasn't the most natural, but right now I feel like my experience as a project finance is very much relevant to my practice in sports law, because I'm dealing with governments, federations, and also private actors within the continent. And what we're trying to build is ultimately a product that speaks to the passions of Africans. So I feel like that's more, I feel a much stronger connection to it than I did to power plants, I guess.
Thank you, Rita. We're going to move to Amanda now. So Amanda, you hold a first degree in economics. So why did you choose to study law and to build a career in business law?
Thank you, Aissatou. That's a very good question. So I'd say that during my first degree in economics, I realized very early on that I was attracted to macroeconomics and that some of the most complex markets were in developing countries. And so I really wanted to find a way to contribute to the economic and social development of these countries. So I started to think of other degrees that I could pursue to push my knowledge further. And so I applied to law school because I believe that law played an important role in the economic development of most countries, and it could create also many career opportunities. So after finishing law school and qualifying as a lawyer in Canada, I was accepted at the London School of Economics, where I specialized in international business law. So that's where I was able to really learn how international business law is used as a tool for economic growth. So I had the opportunity to then work in international arbitration, which is another way of settling disputes on the international level. It allowed me to represent clients in all types of industries in different jurisdictions, and it made me appreciate the role of the private sector, the role that it can play in economic growth. And so I then worked for multilateral development institutions, working with governments and private sector to promote social and economic growth in different regions, but mainly in Africa. And now I'm back with the private sector, working in the Fintech industry, which is thriving in Africa at the moment and will play a big role in financial inclusion. And I really wanted to be part of that. The regulatory environment is very important and can be challenging since it's relatively a new industry on the continent. But luckily, many African countries have taken the lead to modernize their laws and provide predictable business infrastructure to promote good commercial practices. So just going back to your question, why business law? I'd say because it's an impactful area and it's very broad, so it offers many opportunities.
Thank you, Amanda. We can stay a little bit longer with you. You touched on the role of fintech, on financial inclusion. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the transformative aspect fintech can have on people's lives, especially here in Africa?
Yes, of course. Well, so talking about financial inclusion, it's so important on the continent because not a lot of people have access to banks and to being part of the financial infrastructures on the continent. And so fintechs are able to provide new services and to enable the integration of African people to the banking sector in a different way that maybe banks were not able to provide to African people.
Thank you. And I can ask the same question to Rita. Sports have this ability to ignite emotion with people and basically transform people's life. Can you touch on a little bit about that aspect in your everyday job with the NBA?
Well, the idea is simple. Africans are good at basketball. You see it in the NBA. Some of the best players currently in the NBA come from the continent, and it has potential. But if you consider the time difference and also the fact that it's a league that's played in the US, you think, why not bring something of the caliber of the NBA that showcases African talent? And what we aspire to is to see kids cheer from international caliber player from their neck of the woods, and not have to look at it from the US lens. And not just that, actually, the NBA Africa and the BL are actively working on grassroots projects, building courts across Africa to allow kids to play basketball. And the idea is not just as a social initiative, but also to promote the sport of basketball and make it popular, even more popular, actually. We aspire to be as popular as football is on the continent, and to create heroes and icons for kids. And that's something that I think could be able to be a legacy. But most importantly, what we want is to create an African product that's watched internationally. And I think having the experience and the reputation of the NBA, it will create something that the whole world will be watching, not just Africans.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to Penda. Can you tell us how one can identify the next big field of law practice, and what are some of the skills that will enable you to build a successful career in your chosen area? Because a lot of participants today are excited, to hear more about, a few insights that you can share about, embracing a specific sector in the legal practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Esitu. I think any innovative sector could be like the next big field in terms of law practice, because there is a lot of areas where law has to be settled and law is not yet settled. In terms of aviation, I can say like the drones or the UMVs. In these areas, the next years will gonna be very challenging for lawyers in this sector, for example, and like fintech or sport or IP or any I think any innovation and any field that a lawyer could be interested into or has a passion can be adapted to its practice of law. So the main skills I think that one will need to have a successful career in law will be, of course, its ability to tie those passion to the practice of law, and also the creativity in terms of making like arguments that would be very necessary and important in law in terms of making arguments. So with a broad education, you can relate to people and give them, I think, the best advices. That's what I can say in terms of adaptation or in terms of skills, and also networking. Networking and keeping contacts is very important when you're building a career, especially in law and in an area that's grow in a phenomenal way.
I'm going to shift back to Amanda specifically. She mentioned, being, looking at the new innovative sectors. Can you touch a little bit about how you made the switch from an MDB to fintech? How do you make that career move?
Yes. Well, it wasn't an easy move, but as I mentioned earlier, I realized how the private sector had an important role to play, especially on the continent. And so I wanted to get back to it. I find that being in a more fast-paced environment, I wanted something, a new challenge, and fintech being a very new sector for me. I do not have a background in tech, and so it was like the ideal sector, especially that is really booming on the continent right now, and it could really make a difference economically and socially speaking. So that's what brought me to fintech and pushed me to make the move.
Thank you. So shifting back to Rita, and both Amanda and Panda, you can also answer the question after, because I imagine that each of you will face their own challenges. So Rita, what are some of the challenges which you have faced, venturing into a new area of law, and how you did overcome the challenges?
So one of my biggest fears was obviously my lack of background in IP. I mean, most people think the NBA's business is basketball, but it's really IP around basketball. But when at a company that is as big as NBA in this field, obviously they have their own standards, so it's easier to get familiarized with it. But I found that the challenges are actually more commercial than legal, because it's being able to reconcile a big operation and creating an event that is as big as the Basketball Africa League across three countries and on the continent, and being able to do it by the standards we would do it in the US, but not necessarily having your counterparties understanding what you're trying to do and why you're doing this way. But also, I mean, as simple as something that I think any lawyer can relate to is the transition from private practice to in-house, especially in a big organization. I think the dynamics around that, especially in a fast-paced environment and something where you would think that legal is not one of the big departments because it's not at the core of the company you're in, but actually the people like to joke that NBA stands for nothing but attorneys, because actually lawyers are front and center in everything we do. And that's because everything we do at its core is contractual, whether you're talking about IP, events, sponsorships and partnerships, partnerships with the states and the federations. All of it comes down to a contract. And that's why the challenges are actually understanding how to reconcile your legal vision as a lawyer with what the basketball guys want to do and what to see it look like on the court.
Thank you. So Panda, can you share a little bit about your challenges, and also to always stay on a positive note? Maybe you can also share a few wins that you could celebrate for the last year or the past few months, like successes you want to share about being a lawyer in the aviation sector.
I'm very fortunate to have been able to work on many transactions for the airline. I think they all stand out. It's individually, I can say, like acquiring Airbuses or acquiring 4Q-400 for the airline in a time frame of, I think, 5 or 8 years. That's been one of the big, I think, success in terms of transaction working for the airline internally has a legal counsel. And in terms of challenges, we lawyers we look into details. We are very compliant to laws, and internally, the other department, as Rita said, they don't always see that side of the business. They're quick to go. Yes, we have to open this branch. Let's do it right now. But first of all, you have to set up the company, to open to register the company in other jurisdiction, and you have to finalize the contract so that the business will start. They only have in mind a date and a deadline, and you have to meet that deadline. The rest is not is a problem for them, and that's very challenging internally, working as an in-house counsel. And I think in my area of business, the other challenge in air traffic or in airline industry is around the tax issues. And I think the ecosystem of the industry, the lack of communication with, I think, the airport or with the air traffic control, the needs and of the airline is not always the one of the operators or the other infrastructure or service providers, and that's a bit challenging.
We are going to stay a little bit longer with you, Penda. I suppose that the COVID-19 pandemic had a big impact, on the aviation sector. Can you share a little bit about your experience and how you help your company navigate it?
So aviation was on the front line of this pandemic, as we all witnessed. First of all, we've been the aviation has contributed maybe in the spread of the virus, but when we needed the vaccines, and we had a lot of airlines that switches their business and transformed their aircraft into cargo aircraft so that we could access to the vaccine, and so people get vaccinated. So we had our challenges. We are resuming the operations, and the operations resumed, and the restrictions are now lifted up in many of the countries. But aviation did contribute to recover for all of the world, to recover, to get the vaccines, so that all the businesses could run as usual. So I think that was a very challenging moment for aviation, and now we are back. In terms of revenue, we had massive losses, and we are back to where we were at 2019. So can you imagine, we are in 2022, and our revenue are compared to the revenue we had in 2019, luckily for us.
Thank you, Penda. The same question can go to Rita. Since large sports gathering could not happen during the pandemic, how that was handled by your company, and did you play any role? Did legal play in safeguarding the companies from the impacts of the pandemic?
The first season of Avia was set to start in March of 2020 and was literally canceled days before, and shifted into a bubble format in Kigali, Rwanda during the month of May. And when I say bubble, it means that anyone entering the bubble was not exiting for a month and staying the whole way through the competition, and players being tested every day, having to wear masks most of the games. And so both on a logistical side and athletic side, it was really a challenge. And people may have heard about the NBA canceling some of the games early in the pandemic, and the games resuming without an audience. Now, I don't know if you've watched many sports games without an audience. It's not the same thing. So obviously, we want the audience to be there, to be able to enjoy themselves and be safe. And that part of it is really we have a whole medical department within the company to ensure that any event that we have is done in the safest condition every time, taking into account the context locally and internationally. And part of it is mandating the vaccinations for certain categories of staff, and making sure that transmissions are kept to a minimum, and yeah, it's a challenge definitely, because when you're doing something that is addressed to the public, you have to find the balance between being safe and actually having the event that is still entertaining. But I think in that respect, season 2 was a success because we're able to go in 3 markets at once without a bubble format, and the audience was there, and it was a success.
Thank you. So the question to Amanda, perhaps it is the impact of the pandemic was actually different for fintechs. A lot of companies, thrived online, and it actually created opportunities. So maybe you can touch a few words on that. Thank you.
Yes, I think the pandemic was pretty positive for fintechs, especially on the continent. I'd say, well, I joined Paystack about 5 months ago, so it's after the pandemic hit. But I'd say that because all of a sudden people were no longer going as much outside, or going into shops, and the whole world turned towards online. Purchasing things online, paying for things, getting things delivered. And so in terms of fintech, especially payments, that definitely had a positive impact for the business.
Thank you. We're going to stay with you. And this question is not very specific, to your areas of legal practice. And, Penda and Rita are also going to respond. Can you share a little bit about the key achievements and highlight in your career overall? So as a lawyer in general.
Of course. I'd say that one key achievement in my career has been the ability to pursue the career path that I wanted. So visualizing it, shaping it as it goes along, and also doing something that means something to me, and that has a positive impact on people. Often, as lawyers, people tell you that you have to specialize in something right away. Once you're specialized, and if you decide that you want to leave the area, they'll tell you, oh, but you don't have experience in that area, so it'll be hard to get into it. So it's something I've always heard, but I always just went for what I wanted, and it always worked out. So I'd say shaping my career was probably one of my key achievements. Another achievement is the ability to work in different countries. I've worked in Switzerland, France, the UK, Ivory Coast, and of course, Canada. And that has allowed me to learn a lot about different cultures and work environments, work with different people. And it hasn't always been easy, but being able to adapt successfully is for me a key achievement in my career. And some highlights that have allowed me to achieve these things are probably going to study abroad in the UK. When I realized that I wanted to pursue an international career, I knew that obtaining a diploma from an international renowned institution would help me. And so I submitted an application to study at the London School of Economics, and I got accepted. And so that opportunity definitely opened a lot of doors at the international level for me. And yeah, I think, I guess what's important to remember is that everyone's story is different, and things will always end up working out at some point. So
thank you, Amanda. What about you, Rita? Can you share about your key achievement and highlights in your legal career?
Well, I'm a very concrete person, so I mean, the first time I considered something an achievement was when I visited a massive power plant in Morocco that I had spent 3 years working on as a lawyer, and just to see it working, I felt like my work was had more meaning than just spending times on calls and on a Word document in the middle of the night. And I think I had kind of had the same feeling when I ventured into the Dakar arena after the kickoff of the first game, and the arena was empty, but it was all set up with the branding. It really means something to see your work come to life for me. But career-wise, I think it is the satisfaction of having had the choice. I mean, when I took this job, it was I got to the point where I knew I could make it as a lawyer in private practice. I had two offers, one from a law firm to become a counsel, and one to go to the NBA. And I think there was a personal satisfaction in knowing that I could achieve that level in what I've done, but also completely flip the book and do something completely different, which I chose to do.
Thank you, Rita. Very inspiring. Moving to you, Penda.
So I think the biggest success I can noticeable is like whenever an aircraft is delivered and you can see concretely how you've worked and achieved this with the team, but it's hours of working and legal practice, and you get to see the aircraft landing here in Abidjan. I think it's a huge satisfaction. And also the ability to adapt. As I said, I had a general business law background, and when I got into aviation, I knew I liked aviation, but I knew I had to know more about it to deepen my knowledge. So I've been admitted to the ENAC, École Nationale d'Aviation Civile, which is the main school of aviation in Paris. And I did the airline management there. So I get to know every department through every contract, every work my colleagues did. But now it was very concrete for me. So I had to live a little bit what they do every day, and economics like air control, maintenance, all of those contracts. I think it's helped me, better my law practice as well. It's added to my law practice, and that's an important success that I can share with you guys. And also what I highlighted is my ability to adapt and to move forward.
Thank you, Penda. We're going to stay with you, and this is a question for all of us, including myself. So what advice would you give to women, who would want to pursue a career path in a new frontier of legal practice? Maybe we all touch upon advice during your
the first question.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's constant training, I can say, and be always updated to the economic, how it's moving, where are the new area of growth, and there you can see whether the law is settled yet or no. There would be a lot of legal work to do in those new areas. That could be my first advice to anybody who wants to pursue a career path in the new frontier legal practice. And also, as I've mentioned, like have a broad education that's help you choose the area where you're really interested into, and you always do a good legal work when you're interested into an area, a specific area. And that's the advice I can say. I can encourage every woman, especially, to network a lot and join any association that in your work area, in your industry, that your budget allow you to. Like just be in contact with people, keep the network, and maintain that contact. But you never know when it's gonna help you, in your area.
Thank you. What about you, Amanda?
Yes, well, Penda summed it up very well, but so if you take fintech, and I see that one of the questions, I might touch upon one of the questions from Nelly Siwe. But if you're interested in fintech, I'd say try to immerse yourself in it right away. Read as much as you can on the latest developments, the trends, the major players in the industry, and see how you can fit in that ecosystem. See where you can bring an added value. That's what I did because I did not have prior experience in fintech. Another tip, I'd say, you also need to believe in yourself. Anything is possible if you believe in it. And many people might say, yeah, you need experience in the field. But as a lawyer, you have so many transferable skills that you can hit the ground running in a lot of different fields. So if you believe in yourself and you're willing to do the work, then it should work. Going back to what Penda said, you need to be resourceful. If you can imagine it, it probably exists. So for instance, the fintech space is very, well, it could seem very exclusive. When I decided that I wanted to do the move, I realized that I didn't know many people in the field. And so the first thing I had to do was to expand my network in the industry. And so don't be afraid to reach out to as many people as you can to ask for help. Let people know you're interested in that field and that you're looking for opportunities. And there's always people that are willing to help. And if they hear about opportunities, they will share them with you.
Thank you, Amanda. Back to you, Rita.
Oh, taking on everything that Penda and Amanda just said, I would say new frontiers of law are no different than usual frontiers of law, meaning that it's safe to assume that if you want to get into those areas, you're primarily a business lawyer. So any field of law is about understanding the business you're in. How does your company, how does that particular company make money, and how, as a lawyer, can you help it make more money? And that's how you're successful as a lawyer in any company. New frontiers of law, I think, are just interesting if you have the mindset of a trailblazer and you like to do something new that hasn't been done before. And it's more, I think, about personal personality and personal taste than actual skills. It's really more, what are you passionate about, and do you like something new and challenging, or do you like expanding on something else that someone else has built, knowing that in new frontiers of law, I mean, I would imagine if you're in fintech, you're inspired by what the banks have done, same as when you're in sports, you're inspired by what media companies have done. And so it's always building something up from the ground that has driven me. And I think it's the same thing in every field.
Thank you. And I'm just going to piggyback on what each of you said. My piece of advice would be, to be a forever student, invest in yourself, invest in your knowledge. I love to say to my friends jokingly that you can never be overdressed or overeducated. For the education part, it is absolutely true. It is something that you will carry wherever you go, whichever area of legal practice or else you want to conquer. So that would be basically the advice to tie a little bit what all of you said. Basically, keep learning, consider yourself as a forever student. All right, so I'm going to go back to Amanda with the question. How do you ensure that you keep up to date with development in fintech, considering how quick things change in the world of technology? And one day it's Bitcoin, and as you are getting familiar with yourself, with a new NFT will pop up. So how do you keep abreast of the quickness of changes in the fintech industry?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it's a very broad industry, the world of fintech, especially technology. And so, I mean, you cannot know everything, but I found that a few things have helped me stay on top of a lot of things. Twitter, I started following specific people that have an active feed and share a lot of good information and articles. And so that has helped me a lot. And there's also live discussions very often that you can follow and hear what people in the industry have to share. There's also podcasts, very good podcasts. I can share a few later, but they have been helping me a lot understanding the market and the business side of especially payments in fintech. But you can also join associations, go to conferences, try to find people that love sharing their knowledge and learn as much as possible. But other than that, yeah, just reading as much as possible, articles, books, that has helped.
Thank you, Amanda. So the next question is for Hida. How does a lawyer based on the continent get a job with the NBA? Because it seems that most of the time, the jobs are more available to people who are outside of the continent.
So in my case, it is true that at the time I took the job, I was based in Paris, but one of the requirements of the job was to be located physically in Dakar. And actually, when I talked to my boss after the recruitment process, they did struggle in finding someone from the continent. It's not that they were looking there, it's that the pool of candidates with the criteria they were looking at was small. But I have a colleague that started around the same time as me, and actually we were recruited at the same time. She's based in South Africa, and she did her whole career in South Africa in private practice and then at Disney. So I don't think those jobs are not, I do think that those jobs are available to people on the continent. And if you look at the whole staff, actually outside of legal, everyone in the NBA Africa and Basketball Africa League is either from the continent or has ties to the continent and has been living there for years and years. So I think in a company like the NBA, especially where there's a consciousness for social justice and has a very high public profile about being inclusive and diverse, it is a company that really tries to have people from the continent do business in the continent, not only for the looks of it, but also they want people who understand the environment they're operating in. And honestly, even outside the NBA, I would urge anyone to inquire about that when you're interviewing, and on why does this company is looking for this specific profile. Is it something that they have in mind? Because it's one thing to have the right CV, the right skills, and something that looks good on paper. It's something else when you are on the ground and trying to implement that to understand the environment you're in. And although the NBA African Basketball Africa League, for instance, operate mostly in South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, I do bring value in, for instance, explaining how some of the things in Morocco work culturally, or in Algeria or in Egypt, like Ramadan customs in those countries and the TV schedule. Like, people don't know that the whole TV schedule gets rearranged during a month, and that if you're having a game at a certain time, nobody's going to watch it because I've lived it and other people haven't. And so I think your mindset is different as a lawyer when you join a company in-house, because then you have to think about all of the sides of the business and not just your contract that you're working on. And that's why I think that it is in the interest of companies to work with Africans for Africans.
Thank you, Rita. I'm going to take a little bit of time to have the team share the result of the poll. We have, I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to take the poll, but okay, there they are. So you can see for the first question, are you interested in venturing into legal practice in an emerging field? We have a vast majority of yes. So I understand that many of the participants today are interested in switching gears and changing the current legal path. The second one, is it a risky move to venture into legal practice in an emerging field? So perhaps based on your experience, they don't feel like it's a big risk. So I understand also that most of them, at least 52% will take that small risk. And then the third question, women lawyers are not adequately represented in growing fields such as aviation, fintech, and sports, and they absolutely agree. So maybe we can, I know it's not one of the questions in the Q&A, I think that we have a little bit of more time. Can you share about gender equality in your respective field? Quickly, any of you can start.
I think yes, we have maybe less women pilots or aviators than men, but in aviation you find women as pilot. We did train like 2 pilots from Côte d'Ivoire here from scratch. They just went to Belgium and start their training, and they are flying for the airline. And we have women in the maintenance. We have women in like service providers, like in the handling of the flights. In law, I think I only have a man in my team, so you can say we have three other women, and I think we have our say. And as Amanda mentioned, don't be afraid if you thought about working or changing your career path for a new frontier legal practice. Even don't think it's a late thought. It is a valid one, and women should learn, should get trained and practice in those areas without hesitation.
Thank you. Maybe Amanda, I want to share about women in fintech.
Yeah, so actually in my legal team, we're definitely more women than men. So that's always great to hear. I'd say probably as a tech company in general, there's more men in the engineering side of things. And unfortunately, as like founders and CEO in general, it's mostly men. There's very few women founders in fintech companies, but it's gonna change. I have hope.
Thank you. I'm going to take another question from the Q&A. Rita, you want to talk about?
Well, I was going to answer both this one on women and the one about gender. That was in the Q&A section. I think it's a very interesting subject in sports. I mean, not only on the continent, even now with the NBA and the WNBA, it's very much a subject. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it is a male-dominated industry, and we are centered mostly around a male league with the NBA, although the WNBA is rising and the BL is male only, but also on the day-to-day in the business, you deal mostly with men, and most senior positions are held by men. I'm very much hoping to change that. But I think that the advice I would give to any woman in any field is, wherever there is a concern or you feel like your advice or your work is being received differently than it would if you were a man, just say it. Most people, most men don't realize they're being sexist unless you tell them and you explain it to them. Now, everything lies in the fact of delivering it correctly in a way that's not going to be perceived as aggressive, but it is something that has to be voiced and has to be put on the table every time it happens. As for gender identity, I think we need to be realistic about this in Africa, because even in the Western world, in the US and Europe, it is very much something that is the subject of pushback and bigotry. And in Africa, there are a lot of countries where even homosexuality is still legal. So we do have a longer way to go there, I think, but it's definitely going to be a subject that is going to be more and more present. And I think that companies that are in the public eye, not only in sports, but also in media, are going to have to take a stand on this sooner or later.
Thank you, Rita. I'm going to go back on the question, and each one of you spoke about the importance of networking. So we have this question from Cynthia saying she's curious to know how important networking is for your practice, and does it come naturally? What are some of the tools and methods you leverage for building and maintaining your professional networks across Africa specifically, and more generally internationally? Any of you can answer.
I can start. So we did already talk about the importance of networking. I like the question, does it come naturally? For me, it definitely didn't come naturally. I'm a shy person. And so I'd say that at the beginning it wasn't easy, but funny enough, in law school, we were trained to learn how to network. Every week they would organize cocktails so that we would go and, you know, learn to network. Back then it wasn't LinkedIn and, you know, all the social media, but it was mostly just, you know, in person, how to, you know, send emails, follow up, keep in touch. So it's very important. It's definitely something you need to work on if you're not comfortable with it at first, but it definitely becomes easier with time.
Thank you, Amanda. Penda, you want to share a little bit more about networking?
Yes, as Amanda said, like join in associations or using social medias and keep in contact with those people you get, those people you reached. And it's important to keep sending emails and meeting people when you can, talk about the same subject, and they usually have a lot of insight that can help you in your day-to-day work. And I experienced that when I need like to have like the top 10, let's say law firm in a certain country, or other place, you can relate to people that said, okay, I work in that country, and those are the lawyers, the law firms we work with, and it went very well. And then you start your internal assessment of those firms. But you reach to a person specifically to have all like an informations on those firms. That's important. Or access to information, like it can be very easy or basic, but it helps having the good network to access quickly to an important information for a transaction or for a situation you're living or you're working on a file you're working on. That's some example where networking can be very helpful, or even having internship, helping others and integrate the company for an internship to have their first experience. It's important.
Thank you, Penda. And I'm going to add a little bit from my experience. I think you were the one who mentioned joining professional associations or clubs, and that is something that I systematically do everywhere I work. I've worked in, such as Amanda, you know, in Paris, in Switzerland, in the US, and here in Cote d'Ivoire. And every time I get to a new place, I join an association. And I work on maintaining those relationships when I change countries, which happens quite often. You know, invest in your relationship, share news and check on people, and don't only reach out when you need something from them. Also be of service. If you see something relevant for one of your contact industry specific area, share the information, send an article, or if you write yourself an article or a note, legal briefing, share it with your network, and you know, take care of those relationships, and don't always reach out when you need something. So definitely joining groups, associations, and being of service will help you go a long way when you want to network. Rita, if you want to add a little bit on networking, and then we're going to close.
No, I think you covered it all. And there's networking working outside of your organization, but also inside. I mean, if you're already in an organization, don't hesitate to reach out to, especially senior women, to get their advice. Ask for a lunch. Don't be shy about that. And I found that it helped a lot, especially if you are a lawyer, to talk to someone, for instance, that is senior on the commercial side, to get their perspective and advice. And it's also helpful to have a mentor within your organization, but not within your specific area.
Thank you, Rita. The other question, I believe Amanda already responded. For someone with little or no experience in fintech, just passion for the subject, how can I transition to a legal career? I believe if you want to add something, but you already mentioned keeping abreast of the anything relevant in the industry. You mentioned Twitter and so forth.
Yeah, essentially that's it. Just if it's a topic you're passionate about, it's going to be easy for you to stay up to date in the area. And so the only thing missing would be the network, to develop your network in the field and just let people know you're looking for opportunities in that field.
Thank you. I think we have another question in the chat, and I think that will be the last one. How do you join these professional associations? So it all depends, right? Some of them, membership, they work by, you know a member who nominates you and you join the association. Some others are just open to any, legal professional in a specific area. It depends on the association. You can start by LinkedIn, is always a great resource for me. I always start with LinkedIn, but word of mouth, asking questions, and if you see someone who is a member, approaching that member to ask more about the specific organization. So I believe that's it. And we are all here today thanks to the Institute. The Institute is a great resource. You can start. I'm seeing the comment in the chat. You can check the website of the Institute to know more about all these organizations and what they do for women in law in Africa. So that's always a great place to start. So do you have any closing remarks you want to share before I do mine? Any of the panelists?
Well, I see we're out of time, so I'll just thank you so much for organizing this, for having us, and moderating this very nice webinar.
Likewise, I think this was a very interesting session, and thank you, Aissa, for inviting me and the Institute for setting it up, and everyone who joined as well. Thank you for your attention and your time.
Thank you for inviting me. As I said too, I really liked the session, and thank you to Amanda and Rita, and to the Institute as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for advertising, for lack of a better word, for advertising these areas of law, and letting people know that there are areas of law where they can work and they can succeed in. Thank you very much.
I'm going to say thank you again. Thank you to Paddy, thank you to Jorpa, and thank you to the team at the Institute for giving us the opportunity to share about our backgrounds and passion and the challenges we face. The Institute is a great resource. I invite everyone to join on LinkedIn and to follow the news and what they are doing. And I believe there is another roundtable, but it's in Ghana in person on the 15th. So every month there is something, and reach out to us on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to answer. I try to respond to everyone depending on time, but always happy to engage and help you navigate your careers whichever way I can help. So thank you again, everyone, for your time, and take care. Bye.